These are the stories of what happened to Hermann Göring, Joseph Goebbels, Heinrich Himmler, and Martin Bormann. Hermann Göring had always understood the power of spectacle. Early creator of the Gestapo in Prussia, commander of the Luftwaffe, and Hitler's designated successor, he had spent 12 years at the center of Nazi power. Flamboyant, corrupt, and utterly convinced of his own importance. When the Reich collapsed, he intended to go out on his own terms. In the final weeks of the war, Göring made a move that cost him everything he still had. Believing Hitler was finished and trapped in Berlin, he sent a telegram to the Führerbunker suggesting that he, Göring, assume leadership of the Reich. Hitler's response was immediate. He stripped Göring of all titles, expelled him from the Nazi Party, and ordered his arrest. The man who had been second in line to run Germany spent the final days of the war under SS guard at a castle in Bavaria. When American forces arrived, Göring surrendered personally, dressed in a custom uniform, carrying a monogrammed baton, and accompanied by 16 pieces of luggage. He expected to be treated as a statesman. He expected negotiations. Instead, he was driven to a processing camp, stripped of his paracodeine tablets, and told he was a prisoner of war. At the Nuremberg Trials, Göring recovered his swagger. He was the dominant presence in the dock, sharp, combative, and openly contemptuous of the proceedings. He ran rings around some prosecutors during cross-examination, defended his record without apology, and at moments seemed to relish the attention. The tribunal convicted him on all 4 counts. The sentence was death by hanging. But Göring had one move left. On the night of October 15th, 1946, hours before his scheduled execution, he bit down on a cyanide capsule in his cell. He was found dead before dawn. How the capsule reached him has never been conclusively established. A prison guard confessed on his deathbed decades later, but the story has never been fully verified. Göring died as he had lived, controlling the narrative, denying his enemies the ending they had planned for him. Joseph Goebbels was the only member of Hitler's innermost circle who chose to stay until the absolute end. While others fled, negotiated, or surrendered, Goebbels remained in the Führerbunker with his wife Magda and their 6 children. He had built his life around National Socialism. He would not outlive it. As Reich Minister of Propaganda, Goebbels had spent 12 years constructing the public image of the Nazi state, controlling newspapers, radio, film, and public ceremony with a precision that made him one of the most influential propagandists in history. He was also one of the most fanatical. When the war turned against Germany, he doubled down. His 1943 Sportpalast speech, in which he whipped a carefully selected crowd into endorsing total war, remains one of the most studied examples of mass manipulation on record. In the bunker, as Soviet shells landed overhead, Goebbels drafted his contribution to Hitler's political testament and prepared to die. On the night of May 1st, 1945, one day after Hitler's suicide, Magda Goebbels sedated her 6 children and administered cyanide to each of them. She could not, she had said, allow her children to grow up in a world without National Socialism. Joseph and Magda then went to the Reich Chancellery Garden, where they died by gunshot and cyanide. Their bodies were partially burned, following the precedent set the previous day when Hitler's remains were incinerated. Goebbels left behind a family destroyed by ideology and a body of propaganda techniques that communication scholars and political operatives have studied, with varying intentions, ever since. He was 47 years old. Heinrich Himmler had commanded the SS, overseen the concentration camp system, and administered the machinery of the Holocaust with bureaucratic thoroughness. By the war's end, he was arguably the man most directly responsible for the murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others. He was also, in the final weeks, desperately trying to save himself. Without Hitler's knowledge, Himmler had been holding secret negotiations with the Swedish diplomat Count Folke Bernadotte. offering a German surrender to the Western Allies, though not to the Soviets, in exchange for his own immunity from prosecution. When Hitler learned of the contact, he declared Himmler a traitor and stripped him of all offices. The negotiations led nowhere. The Allies rejected any deal with Himmler outright. After the surrender, Himmler attempted to disappear into the chaos of a defeated nation. He shaved his distinctive mustache, covered one eye with a black patch, and obtained papers identifying him as a low-ranking police auxiliary named Heinrich Himmler. He joined one of the vast columns of displaced men moving through the shattered German countryside. It almost worked. On May 21st, 1945, Heinrich Himmler was detained at a British checkpoint near Bremen after presenting false identification as a low-ranking military police officer. Something about him aroused suspicion, prompting further questioning. He was transferred into custody and held for identification. On May 23, 1945, during a medical examination at a British interrogation facility in Nuremberg, officers searched him for concealed poison. As a doctor inspected his mouth, Himmler suddenly crushed a hidden cyanide capsule with his teeth. Within minutes, he was dead. He had evaded every tribunal, every interrogation, every formal reckoning, dying in custody before the world could fully confront him with the scale of what he had done. Martin Bormann had been, in many ways, the least visible and most powerful man in Hitler's circle. As the Führer's personal secretary, he had controlled access to Hitler in the final years, deciding who could see him, filtering information, and accumulating influence that many more famous Nazi figures never matched. He was also almost entirely unknown to the German public. When Berlin fell, Bormann vanished. He was convicted in absentia at Nuremberg and sentenced to death. And then the sightings began. Reports placed him in Argentina, in Paraguay, in Brazil. Nazi hunters tracked leads across South America for decades. Some concluded he was alive. Others believed he had died in the chaos of Berlin's collapse. The truth took 50 years to confirm. In 1972, construction workers in Berlin unearthed a skeleton near the route Bormann was known to have fled on the night of May 1st, 1945. But without DNA technology, identification was inconclusive. In 1998, forensic scientists extracted DNA from the remains and compared it to a living relative. The match was confirmed. Martin Bormann had died within a kilometer of the Führerbunker, almost certainly in the first hours of his escape attempt, possibly by cyanide, possibly caught in the crossfire of a Soviet ambush. He had been missing for 53 years. The most powerful ghost in post-war history had never left Berlin at all. 4 men, 4 ends. A suicide in a prison cell. A family destroyed by belief. A death on a roadside in disguise. A skeleton beneath a Berlin street. What connects them is not how they died, but what they chose in the moments when the power finally ran out. Göring played to the crowd. Goebbels refused to imagine another world. Himmler tried to bargain his way free, and Bormann simply ran. None of them expressed remorse that history has found credible. None of them faced a full public reckoning, and the regime they built with such confidence left behind a wound in human history that has not closed in 80 years. Which of these 4 stories do you find most difficult to look away from? Let us know in the comments. And if you'd like to go deeper into the hidden figures of the Second World War, subscribe. There's much more still to uncover.